Hi, I'm Terrie Rouse, and I've been a museum and executive professional for over 30 years. And let me tell you a little bit about what I've done. First of all, I started off as an academic. I spent many years in school, and I came out as an African historian, and I also have a certificate from the School of International Affairs. But in my mind, I always had a passion for museums. And where did it come from? Well, I suppose as a child, my parents used to take us to museums here in the Washington, D.C. area. And also, I like creative stuff. I like creating things and being part of things. And I think that sort of translated into a love of how people moved in spaces, how people learned in an informal environment called museums. So I ended up being able to participate in that field. So it started off in New York City, Shortly after leaving Columbia University, I got a job at the budding Studio Museum in Harlem. And I can't tell you how much joy I had that first day when I realized what I was part of. But it was an opportunity that you don't often get in your life, where you could be part of something when it was a relatively new organization, and then you had a chance to grow with it. So I started first as a curator of a collection. One of the advantages I had at this collection was actually in the basement of a state office building, a building that was called the Harlem State Office Building, but is now the Alan Clayton Powell State Office Building. And my job was to go in and organize this collection. Now, I'd had a considerable amount of experience doing community work. I had spent time in Africa as a 20-year-old building a school building. I had done work in the South with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. I'd even worked on a farming project in North Carolina. So I knew a little about this notion of working with people. And now to translate that experience into actually going into a space and creating and working in a gallery and bringing a new experience to this building. And that's what I did for 2 years. It was amazing. I learned the fine art of working with politicians, the fine art of interpreting the role of the community in building your galleries, and also observing how people enjoyed what you did and also took pride in it, and of course questioned it, because that is always the role of your visitor in your space. So I learned a lot from that. Long hours, little controversy from time to time, but it's always a spark that taught you something new. And from there, I was promoted at the Studio Museum to become the senior curator during a time when the institution was growing, moving from the loft space on 125th Street over into the main building, which is on 125th Street, across the street from the State Office Building. That process taught you and reinforced the issues of registration, collections care, exhibits, building a department, all of those things which are the fundamentals of museum work. And that hard process is what helped build the career that I now have in the museum world. It also taught me much more on how to deal in public spaces, how to deal in government entities, how to deal also on the federal level, because all of that was combined into that process. So the Studio Museum in Harlem did senior curator, an investment in a lot of good times, a lot of hard work, but more importantly, the basics, the principles were born there, and that's what I went on from. From there, I went on to become the head of the New York Transit Museum, which at the time was just an exhibit space. It's actually underground, the Board of Ed in Brooklyn. And what they wanted to do was to professionalize this space. It's 60,000 square feet. It's a subway station. It had a rolling stock collection, otherwise known as subway cars, and it had an immediate audience of 50,000 New York City Transit Authority employees who were proud not only of their subway side, but also of their surface side in the bus system, and also the complicated world that makes up all of the transit system. So I learned a lot there in developing not only an institution within an institution, how to partner with people who are disparate in what they do. Maybe they ran the rolling stock side, maybe they ran the bus company, but they all had a sense of pride. So we developed a mission which was about the people, and it was about New York City, because without public transportation, there would be no New York City. That's how 8 million plus people move around. So it is the economic engine of the community, and we learned how to tell that story. And that was completely new approach for me on building development around communication and around simple messaging. We also built our gift shop based upon the icons of the subway system, subway tokens, the old ticket boxes, Everybody has a memory of the New York City transit system, its icons. We use that in our communicating. Incredible lesson on the building blocks. So those two experiences, which spanned the 12 years of my life, became the basis by which I built the rest of my career in terms of learning to do the hard job, learning to do what essentially was sometimes very hard turnaround work, and also remembering always the audience is important, the partnerships are important, and more importantly, you have to be able to prove and evaluate what you're doing. Those are the keys of sort of good management on every executive level, no matter what your field is. And if you're talking about work within the performing arts and within the museum community, which are places of engagement, that's an even more important tool to always keep your eye on those particular balls.